I have two questions, one for you, Liz, and also the other one for Dr. Barrack. Let me start with Liz. Liz, I just learned with great concern that we no longer talk about single parenting as the only singlehood, especially in terms of marriage. I think this is very much worrying, that we may have people who are married, yet they're living single life as well. And tied to that, how is your program, which I think we work together, Marriage Preparation and Accompaniment, is going to help us in a very special way to help basically the single parenting. And I'm not talking about those couples who are living in single life, but single parenting, where in most parishes, there's a big stigma going on, especially between those who are married and those who are not married. And I'm talking about, you've gone around and seen, they are not either welcoming in the programs of the church, they are not programs for accompanying them. What is your office doing, especially in terms of trying to implement the marriage and accompaniment program, which now we know from the dicastery is 2 years program for people to be journeyed with, as opposed to 1 month, 2 months, and there's like unified guidelines. How are you working towards making sure that this is implemented on the ground, and especially incorporating the single parenting who right now, as we speak, are not having proper guidelines on how they're supposed to be accompanied in most of the parishes? That is my first question to you. And then, of course, Dr. Barrack, by the way, I'm your age mate, because when we were singing these songs, I was actually remembering very well when literature was literature, you know. These are things that were real in our life. And again, we're encouraged to study so that we can get better jobs. Now my question is, you've just mentioned that education right now should be more oriented towards creativity as opposed to what we call academic achievements. What is your take on the current CBC program that we have, or CBE that we have? Is this the hope that we are actually trying to get in terms of education in Kenya, and not only in Kenya, maybe for Africa, in the coming, as we move forward to becoming new frontiers for the world? That is my question for you. Please, you can start, please.
Thank you, Dr. Sister Kabana, and thank you once again for this opportunity. To the question on single parents and the stigma between them and the married couples, I think one of the things we need to be very intentional about is, and that's why I talked about inclusion, because the church, and Jesus says he did not come for those who are all, he came for those who are suffering, for those who are in need, and that is why Jesus would also be seen, healing the people on a Sunday when he wasn't expected to do that. So it is again for the church to ask itself, or to ask herself, do we neglect the single people because they're not living perhaps as they should? And one of the things we've really been encouraging the coordinators within the dioceses and the pastoral coordinators and the priests and the different pastoral agents is to have programs that target different members, because that complaint we've actually heard about it. When we are having our meetings, people will always say, why are we discriminating? And so we always encourage, and then you saw the programs that I showed. Most of our programs, yes, we have programs that will specifically target couples, but again, we also have couples, like when we talk of the positive parenting program, we cannot say that today we are only going to speak to couples on marriage, on positive parenting, because we want all the parents to be empowered, to be accompanied in their journey of parenting. So even when we talk about psychosocial support, looking at issues of GBV, perhaps this is a person who is single because they went through abuse, they're facing or they faced abuse in their marriage, and we know, like the widows, this is someone whose spouse has died, and in some of our cultures we know how actually some of them are actually driven out of their homes. They are married to a home. So it is what we really encourage is accompanying everyone in the church, not to form a group for them, because then that is like we are encouraging singlehood. But then we encourage formation of programs, accompaniment programs, and to look at them as a special group that needs a lot of care, a lot of accompaniment, to even help them to discern, are they seeking to live a chaste life? Are they desiring to one day get into marriage? So there's a lot that as a church we can do to accompany everyone in the church. We talk of from ages 0 to the 2. Everyone within the family setup needs accompaniment. And so marriage and family life ministry, we say, is for everyone within our church.
Thank you very much. I do hope that my sister here will also be able to comment a bit on education, because in any event I intend to trespass a bit and go into her space and say something about families. I come from a large family, and the dynamics are quite complex. As a Christian gentleman, I have often been puzzled about what I have called biblical ellipses. Biblical ellipses. Biblical ellipses in the sense that the biblical story is very big, that if they were to put there every detail, they would probably be still writing the Bible today. So we have to appreciate the ellipses, and I know that I go into controversial space, that we have had different canons that have put the biblical read together. The one that I'm most familiar with is the Moratorian canon. There are other canons as well, but I think they would be appreciative of the ellipses. For example, the woman is basically missing. I know that we have the women of courage, women of redemption, women of grace. Very few, when you look at the women from Genesis to Revelation, when you look at the women in the family space, when you look at the women in the context of what we are talking about, is it possible that there were single women? I think of Mary of Bethany, when I think of Martha of Bethany, when I think of Lydia, when I think of Phoebe, who is commended to us by Paul of Tarsus, what is their situation? When I think of Hannah, the prophetess, I'm not so sure whether we need to do more biblical exegesis in those spaces and come up with some practical guides to our context today. When I think of the Syrophoenician woman, her husband or spouse, whatever is not mentioned anywhere. When I think of the poor woman who is asked by the man of God to make some bread for him. And she says, we have enough flour for one day. After we eat, we die. And so on and so forth. But coming back to what has been given to me, I have recently read two very interesting books, both of which are biographical. The first one was a rereading of Jaramogi Oginga's Not Yet Uhuru, which was published in 1967, and which still has a lot of message and meaning for us. He discusses education, and he laments about the education that Africans were being given the time that preceded just before he went to school in the colony. It was basically an education that sought to teach them basic reading and writing, so that some of them could work as junior clerks, weighing milk on a farm to say these are so many gallons and it's costing so many cents, and to be able to compute that. The other one is a book titled Mzee Ruksa, and I'm sure the father from Dar es Salaam is familiar with Mzee Ruksa. It's the autobiography of Mzee, the late Ali Hassan Mwinyi, and he devotes quite a bit of it on education that people were receiving at that time. Both Mzee Ali Hassan Mwinyi and Jaramogi Oginga Odinga are critical of an education that seeks to create what we could call factotums. Factotums, watu wa mkono, kanda ya moko, watu wa kufanya kazi ya mkono, not thinkers, factory workers. I think that the Platonic appreciation of society within three demarcations of the soul is important even in education. That you must have the thinkers, you must have the doers, you must have the protectors, you must have the innovators, you must have the early adapters, you must have the later adapters, and you must try to pull everyone along so that there are no laggards who remain behind not knowing what is happening. What I have seen, and I do spend a lot of time in the village in this country, is that we are now deliberately using education to create a class society. That there is education which we call CBC, curriculum, competence-based curriculum. And your competence could be about swimming, where I have been in Emmanuel, where I was born and brought up and where I live, and I have seen the children in Emmanuel Primary School being taught how to sit on an airplane and how the airplane takes off. I have seen all that being imagined. When we talk about we have to imagine, that is not the kind of imagination we are talking about. I have seen children who are trying to swim, and they are swimming in air because there's no swimming pool. So they are told this is how you do the backstroke. But there's no water for them to do the backstroke. This is how you float. I think the first day that kid finds himself in the Mediterranean trying to cross to Europe, he will drown. He has not learned anything about swimming. We have another cadre of children within that CBC who are attending private academies, and they have a bit more of practicality within that competence space. Certainly, when they leave school after what we were singing about, they are likely to find some little place, maybe via a polytechnic or something like that. Then finally, We have an elite class of children who are attending international schools in our own space. The paradox, since today we are talking about paradoxes, is that those children in international schools, where they are Kenyan, they are the children of the people who are in charge of education in Kenya. The people who have given us CBC are sending their children to GCSE and international baccalaureate and so on and so forth. There's common wisdom in my village. It says that if you cook for us, you must also eat from that pot. You cannot cook for us and say, this is yours, and I've got mine from a different pot, which has been cooked by other people there, and you expect us to eat. Because we don't know what you have put in that food that you want us to eat. If our CBC is not good enough for your children to be there, then abolish it. Give us something which your children can also attend, and that cuts across the spectrum. If the hospitals that we go to are not good enough, if we must die in our hospitals here, and you can only die in our Whitehall in London, then you should not be in charge of health. You know, African leaders don't die in Africa unless it's a crisis. They die abroad. They go there sitting in a first class on exclusive airlines, and they come back as frozen cargo.
Thank you for having.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth and Dr. Barrack, for responding to those initial questions. Those questions were floated to our facilitators by us on the panel to give chance to the audience to prepare yourselves. And one of our standards is that you want to make it very brief and very easy for the facilitator to get exactly the gist of the question and be able to answer to you concisely, so that also in the interest of time and at the same time to be able to respond accordingly. So we will take a round of 2 questions per speaker, or let's say 4 questions, and then we will respond to those while we also monitor our time. Thank you.
So thank you so much, our panelists. So we'll take the first 2 questions, but in the round we'll distribute some papers for those who will not have time to hear their questions. So you're able to write them down and share. We got a hand from the sister.
Thank you so much. So my question goes to Dr. Barrack. Many young people today, they feel betrayed by politics, the economy, and the culture. Now, from your perspective, what can restore their confidence, and how can faith communities, that is, as the religious, participate in that renewal? Thank you.
My first question goes to Elizabeth. Talking about the paradox of marriage and what you highlighted, I want to ask, how are you helping those people who are affected by the socio-economic situations of our modern world in terms of wives running away or staying in marriages because the husband is not working, or she is earning more than the husband. And even the issue of having children is now being determined by the economic situations of our societies in our countries. My next question goes to Dr. Barrack, Muluka. We have seen a transition, talking from the perspective of peace and conflict, a transition from what I can call the first wave of democracy in Africa, where people rejoiced when they ushered in new governments, to what I see now as the new wave of democracy sweeping across Africa in terms of coup d'etats and uprisings. Now my question, Doctor, is, do you think Africa has reached a stage where this new age, this new wave of what I classify as the new democracy will sweep across the continent, as we witness what is happening in Tanzania, and we have seen what has happened in Burkina Faso and in other countries, not leaving out my country, which will be going to the polls next year. And we have seen new governments that are coming, trying to hold on to power by changing constitutions. Thank you so much.
Yeah, my first question is addressed to Sister Miss Elizabeth. It is true that marriage is a gift, and we believe that. However, how may you make understand to that man or woman who thinks that the choice he made is wrong? The second one is addressed to Dr. Barrack. The gospel of hope is preached every day, and it has become somehow boring to some people because of the challenges, political, economic, and so on, that they are going through. Therefore, how may you help those people to have a better understanding of hope rather than a mere manipulation? Thank you.
We want to take those 4 questions. I think 3 questions for Dr. Barrack, isn't it? Yeah, so you start with the first question, and then Elizabeth will respond to the second question as they follow in order, and then we'll take the second question for you and the second question for Liz as well. The first one was basically the betrayal of, by the youth, by the political and economic situation, and how can faith-based institutions can help in this?
Thank you very much. There is a saying that every society has got the kind of government it deserves. And I think that is true of Africa, even in its wretchedness, that the deformed governments that we have are actually the governments that we deserve. They're the governments that we deserve because we play very passive roles. The youth want to play passive roles. They want to be there to lend themselves to the political class as singers, dancers, clappers, and such other roles. Some of them as bouncers, some of them as rumor-mongers. They use the technology that we have, bashing each other on behalf of the political class. They must begin by emancipating themselves. In Africa today, as we spoke, we have got a very rich youth dividend. the young population that is aged between 18 and 35 in Kenya, for example, constitutes easily about 70% of the potential voting population. Just now, as we speak, there is a continuous voter registration going on, and the indications when we last checked last week were that very few of those potential voters are getting there. We cannot just sit there and lament and wring our hands and complain and say nothing is happening. They must go out there to register. And when the day of voting comes, they must go out there to vote. But there's also something in a country like mine, which is called chota. They say chota, ni chote, school. They want money. They want someone to grace their hands. You've got to liberate yourself more from that space. The faith-based communities, the role is to re-educate ourselves and take us into the space of moral rearmament as a tool of self-liberation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for that question on the issue of socio-economic challenges and how that leads to separation, how it's affecting children, and for women who are earning more than their husbands. First, I would like to say perhaps you've heard of this where women say that the husband's money is ours, but her money is hers. We have all heard of that. And again, when we look at our parents, when they were growing up, the men were the providers and women were sitting at home waiting for their husbands to provide. But then that has changed nowadays. We are all working. So why not all share responsibilities within the home? There's a story, I don't know if you heard of it, this couple, they had been married for so long and the husband always paid rent and it was not cheap rent. They were staying in an ex-house and the husband had been paying rent for so long, and of course in some homes the men will tell you they don't question their women about where they take their money. So the husband one day discovers that this house he has been paying rent actually belongs to the wife. You can imagine, if it was you, what would you do? You've been paying rent of like Kenya shillings 100,000 every month, only for you to discover that the house is actually owned by your wife, and it's again a question of this oneness. When people say we are getting married and we are becoming one, where does it separate? And when do we start talking about my money and his money? Do we sit down to plan about this money that we have? Can the children be sent home because the husband does not have money, but then the wife her bank account is actually, heavily loaded. There's a man who died, actually it's the lady who died, and when she was in the hospital and very sick, she was just there, and this mama is there waiting for the husband to take care of her bills, her healthcare bills, and unfortunately the bill was very heavy and they were not able to raise enough money, so the lady unfortunately died. And when she died, because the man was actually looking for money from everywhere, he's gone, he's fundraised. So when she died, this man just walks to the bank and says, hey, come to close my wife's account because now she's no longer there. And he discovers that he's actually told, is this your wife? And he's told that this account has a lot of money actually there. So, and now this man just tries to remember, when the wife was very sick, she could not even agree for them to use her money for her medication. And she died with millions of money in the bank. The lady was actually one of those big clients of that bank. And so you can imagine, do we call that selfishness? I think it's more than selfishness. What about self-giving? What about mutual love? What about, that oneness again, I still ask, how does it, where does it end? Where does it separate? So when we are preparing couples for marriage, that is why it's very important that they learn to talk about money. They learn to understand, what do you say about money? What do I say about money? How do I spend? How do you spend? How do we plan about our money? It is our money. It's not, because how can I be dying in the hospital and my bank account is heavily loaded just because my husband doesn't have money? I mean, children being sent home. We cannot bear children just because you don't. I mean, we talk about being open to life in the context of marriage. So this woman who decides she'll go and get all these contraceptives to ensure that she doesn't get more children because maybe there's no money to feed the family, So it's a question, so something else we also do, and especially towards economic empowerment of the family, is that we have in both the psychosocial support manual, because it looks at family resilience. So we talk about empowering couples, empowering families to invest, to make savings, to look for resources that can sustain the family. So we also do economic empowerment of families, and that helps to address now the economic challenges that are so affecting many families nowadays. So again, I would still talk of marriage preparation and accompaniment, because that is one very critical area, but also economic empowerment is something we incorporate in most of our programs, both psychosocial support and family resilience, and also the positive parenting program. We have actually a whole topic that talks about family financial planning. And planning for the money, of course, has to start with where do we look for the money, so that then we sit down together, we plan, and then we can execute on the plans that we have. And again, how do we come up with a project together as a couple? Recently, just as I finished, we were graduating about 260 parents who have gone through the positive parenting program in Ngami Diocese. Father tells me it comes from there. And one of the women told me that the husband always, spend his money wherever he wanted. He would go drinking and never provided for the family. But having gone through this program, now they sit down together, and he's actually now paying for the school fee. Because again, we have some parents, some men who are just using their monies, maybe drinking alcohol, and not minding the responsibilities in the family. So it is again a question of calling for both parents to take up responsibility of raising and caring for the family. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Liz. And now we'll talk to Dr. Barrack, especially on the third question on peace and conflict management amidst the new wave of democracy that is sweeping all Africa.
Thank you very much once again. Actually, it's not new. It's engaging the reverse gears, because the continent has been there before. We started with the dawn of independence, which did not convert itself into a morning of fulfillment. So, as early as 1960, we saw the first coup d'etat against Silvano's Olympio. And others followed very quickly in Nigeria, in Ghana, in Congo. So we're just going back to where we were in those years, that our situation becomes so wretched that the people in uniform come to tell us that we have come to rescue you. You can look at Sudan. The military arrived about 2-3 years ago. They were supposed to be rescuing it. In fact, they hijacked a popular uprising. And the Rapid Rescue Force, RSF, which I'm told is partly domiciled in Nairobi, who are essentially the Janjaweed that were wreaking havoc in Darfur. You can see what they have done to the country. So it's not necessarily liberating. The best situation remains reform through the ballot. But what happens when Samia Suluhu Hassan is re-elected by 98% of the voters? As we sit here this morning, she has been declared the winner of the recent chaos in Dar es Salaam. And she scored 98%. Where does that happen? So we must be assertive as citizens, and I think the true liberation is coming, and it's going to come through the youth of Africa.
Okay, Liz, there was another question for you here. When bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh is no longer good, it's a wrong choice, it's not fitting the rib. What next?
No, that's a very interesting question. Now, perhaps as I do that, sister, I want you to also help me to answer this question, or a priest who is here. How do you cope as a woman? You married a man, then later he becomes gay. Sister, this one is now, as I respond to that question, I'm trying to look for, imagine you, okay, some of us, in the olden days, our parents used to, they never used to choose actually. Did they used to choose who they're getting married to? They were just finding themselves there. You just found yourself there. Now, you make a choice and then you find that this is not what you wanted. Do you wake up tomorrow and say, did you go to church, first of all? Were these married in church? And were they prepared for marriage? Or did they, are they cohabiting? Did they wed? Are they in the sacrament of marriage? But then the question is, they were not prepared, I would imagine. There's something when sister is talking about marriage, she always, and I think I heard it also from someone else, and they normally say, it is better to break an engagement than a marriage. And so I think for me, the emphasis we put on marriage preparation has to carry more weight, because by the time I get married to this person, I should fully know who they are and they should know who I am. and it should be an intentional decision that I make to get married to this person. But then if I'm already there, and this marriage is not, it's not working because of ABCD, and you discover, perhaps I would imagine that you have specific reasons that would make this person feel that this is the wrong thing for them. And I would just imagine like the case of gay. So this is a lady who innocently got married to this man, not knowing that this man is gay, And that's why I know this, what the church teaches on some of these things, and that's why I really would want sister to respond to that. So the circumstances that someone finds themselves in are the ones that would determine what happens. If it is just a matter of, this person, perhaps I feel like I made the wrong decision because, she was not snoring and now she snores in bed. Those are things you can handle. If a couple is maybe having, there's those challenges that you can refer them to a psychologist and they can get help that they need. There's a question, we were in Mombasa, and sister asked the coordinators, who were family life coordinators, and the question was, if you found a marriage, there's this couple who came to you and they told you, we are having these challenges, and do you tell them, hey, this one is gone, this one is gone? You go home and everyone packs their bags and you go separate ways. Are we going to kill the marriage, or are we going to look for firewood to come and reignite this fire? So it is a question of what is the magnitude of the issue. On the specific one about gayism, I will let sister respond to. But there are other things as pastoral agents. That's why we are talking about catechesis for the pastoral agents. That's why we are talking about, developing a deeper understanding of marriage and family, in line with the church teachings, in line with the Bible, in line with the message, the gospel teachings on what marriage really should be. And so when challenges come of this nature, what kind of solutions do we offer to these people? I mean, many people, you get married and you discover this person is not actually what I thought he is, but then do we all quit? We look for solutions to them. So sister, you can respond to that question.
I don't know whether to respond or I give Barrack this one more question before this one came. But all the same, how do you cope with as a married woman, with the person who has already joined the LGBT? Now, there are many answers to this. One, we need to understand from right at the beginning whether this person was already addicted to this before marriage, and if that happened, how come during the preparation it was not solved? The current marriage preparation you're talking about does not leave any room for chance. All these things are taken care of, including addictions that people are going through. One of them is addiction to homosexuality and so forth. And of course, somebody who is homosexual by nature is not fit either to be a priest, and if he's not free to be a priest, he's not fit to be in marriage. Now, homosexuality, LGBTIQ+, from the church perspective, it is termed as a disorder, intrinsically evil, meaning you are dealing with a patient here, somebody who needs help. And and of course, one of the causes of mental illness that we know is happening right now. So you're dealing with somebody who's not well. Yeah, somebody who's not well. And just like you promised in death do us part, there is need for this person to be helped. And as you say, the solution lies not only in getting a clinical officer, but also a neurologist, because also it affects the brain. How will this person be able to live with the family? Actually, I always say it is the most expensive treatment to be done if you're living in LGBT. It's very expensive. And the woman has to persevere until death do us part. He's still your husband. Of course, there's no conjugal love being celebrated. By conjugal love, I mean, we don't call it sexual intercourse in marriage, we call it conjugal love. It cannot be celebrated because things have to be natural as possible. It cannot be asking through the back. That is disordered. So this person has to be guided, and the church stand is just like that. He has to be guided through, not only through counseling, but also pastoral care. But the marriage is still valid and must remain valid. But the celebration of conjugal act is no, because it is not possible as long as the person still is going the wrong way. But then that brings another question, is why is it that nowadays, and I'm asking because you're young, why is it that nowadays I have a lot of cases of families, couples telling me, is asking me, is not homosexual, but is asking me for the back vis-a-vis the front. And this asking for the back, because they are saying the front, you've given back to many children, I don't want to go there anymore, is leading slowly to homosexuality. And women are cooperating. They are cooperating in this. So I'll take a back question to you. On the church, we help this person. But for you also who are married, how much are you compromising also in your marriage? This is also an issue that we need to work on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sister. Now, okay, first I always say that I don't know how many have interacted with homosexual people or people who are practicing homosexuality. And when you interact with them, you will discover that these are people who need a lot of healing. They need a lot of accompaniment. Perhaps this is a young girl who grew up in a family where she saw the mother abused, and so she decides never to associate with men. So what is the, as a sociologist, I also like to look at what are the root causes for the human behaviors that we are seeing in the society. So for someone who is, this girl, this man who is homosexual, there's this man who was married to his wife and they had been living together for like 10 years. And he had never engaged in, conjugal act with her, and or the normal. So he always preferred oral sex. And so the lady got really disturbed. And one day she sought help. And when they went for counseling, she was really always worried. Why is it that my husband never does, the normal way? He is always preferring oral sex. And so they went through counseling, and when this man was brought on board, he shared how he was introduced to oral sex by his auntie. So his auntie used to live abroad, and whenever he came home, he would engage this man, who was that time a young boy. He would make her, sexually satisfy her. And he did that for so many years. And so, again, we know psychology and how it accustoms someone so that their sexuality or their sexual energy just moves to the mouth and they get satisfied when they use oral sex as opposed to So finally, this man expressed that the problem, so you can see now, where was the problem? The problem is that this man needed healing because he had been sexually abused by the auntie for all those years. And so they went through counseling and he was finally able to actively engage in normal conjugal act to the wife, and they were able to bear children. So whenever we are looking at some of these challenges in the marriage, we have to look at, this is someone who tells you, my husband, we were okay, but now he is gay. What caused that to happen? We have to look at what are the causes of the challenges we are facing in marriage. What are the causes that is causing, all these problems we are talking about. Why is it that the fire that was very hot in marriage, this love that was, that people were holding hands, they were calling each other very sweet names, and all of a sudden, they are calling each other Mama Nani, Baba Nani, you no longer even address me by my name. So it is about, really looking at the solutions we can find for the specific challenges that people are facing. Now, what sister is asking about husbands preferring anal sex with their women, I think it's a very unfortunate thing. Okay, we talk of dignity of the human person. You know, we talk of, again, as women, I know when we encourage, in our home, my grandpa says, a man who beats a wife is a coward. Now, I always ask girls, you know, you're dating a man and he beats you. What would make that girl get married to this man? He has shown you that he can beat you and you're just a girlfriend. So again, in marriage, why would a woman allow the husband to do the opposite of what is expected? You know, it's again having very clear boundaries as a couple, but again journeying with these people to show them that, you know, marriage, and this is how God created it to be, not going the opposite of what is expected. So I think for me, sister, is more of even talking to the women to know, you know, how do I respect my dignity as a person, and how does my husband respect that dignity? You know, because for me it is again striving of my dignity. And I know we talk of even, you know, raping marriage, you know, if it's non-consensual, you know. So it's again a matter of a lot of catechesis. We need to do a lot of catechesis for people to continuously respect each other in marriage. Again, sex is psychological. Why would someone, I interacted with older women from Kisumu, where you come from, and they were saying, so it's again psychological, because I've had young girls say, they don't want to give birth naturally, they want to go for CS. We know it is nowadays being done selectively. So why would someone, and it's because they have been told that if you give birth naturally, you will enlarge, you'll never go back to normal. But if you sit down with women, and that's why I like interacting with different age groups of, you know, couples and women and men, because the older women will tell you that, you know, you go back to very normal. And this, God has created women amazingly. So it is again addressing that psychology, the misconceptions, the misinformation that is being given to our young girls. And for these men to start imagining, you've heard of these men who even go to the labor ward with their women and they watch them deliver, but they will still enjoy conjugal act with them. What about this one who has never even seen her deliver, and he goes around saying that my wife has, you know, so it's a lot of conversations we sometimes even like to have with women separately and men separately to address the psychological misconceptions, misinformation that is making marriage life watered.
So thank you. We have been given an ultimatum, and actually we are behind time wait for no man. Yet we see here a plethora of questions that are telling us that really the audience did listen and follow the presentations that Dr. Barrack and Mrs. Elizabeth have given. And since we do not have even a single extra minute to answer these questions, I would like to just read them, and then in the last parting shot, anything that you can do conclusively, maybe in terms of a general principle that can help the audience to deduce from that the answer to their questions in a simple way, and in our conclusion that could help. So thank you, Dr. Barrack, for your sharing. I would like to ask if young people are encouraged to study so that their future will be better, yet after finishing their studies there is no job, how can you encourage them to continue their studies in this world that encourages better future without job? And what can you help the government leaders so that instead of claiming that the country is rich but citizens are poor, to help the citizens develop fast, since we all know that the country is belongs to the citizens and it is not of their own. Then Africa looks rich physically and naturally. She has many economic resources, but is left last in rank of growth. Her people seem to be intelligent. What is wrong with her? What can you say about her? And to you, Mrs. Elizabeth, how are you helping young girls who, within a second, they become elevated to motherhood without marriage? Something which can make them look at marriage in a negative manner. Do they need to embrace marriage? Another one to Dr. Barrack. I do think that our African leaders generally need a kind of workshop or conference in which they are taught skills of governing people. I always ask, is it that they are ignorant or they know the right thing yet always do the opposite? What do you say, Dr. To Elizabeth, in today's society we see a growing number of educated ladies, working class, who choose to remain single and avoid marriage. What advice would you offer as church to such women, and how can the church support them in accordance with the calling themselves humanizers? In avoidance of calling themselves humanizers. I believe that is the meaning. The church excludes single parents from receiving sacraments. Why? In what ways is the church avoiding stigmas towards single parenthood? So with these questions, we can only just paint a big stroke. We may not be able to answer them because also they come motivated by a different experience possibly. If in a nutshell can give a principle that can help them deduce an answer, that will be a very good parting way so that we also be able to conclude. Thank you. We can begin with Dr.
Thank you once again. My answer will be simple, perhaps a little too simple, but I think it's practical. Be the change that you want. You can't expect good things to happen while being passive. That we sit back and wait for somebody else to bring about the change that we want. So this is not a football match between two foreign teams somewhere in Europe, where you sit in front of a TV and cheer people who do not even know that you are cheering, and then the next day you say, we beat you. This is something that you must participate in, define your role and participate and think. Reject this thing of being told that somebody has thought for us. Alituacha hapa na hapa ametuacha hatutoki. I rest my case. Thank you.
You know, matters of marriage are very interesting, and marriage is mysterious. And I know if we stay here, we will have many questions and we will keep looking for responses. But one thing I want to say in general is that there's hope in marriage. And I find a lot of hope in listening to and just interacting with older couples, because they have so much wealth that they can share with both young couples and the young people who are yet to get married, who are desiring to get married. And so one thing that we've been encouraging and I always look forward to is when you're having those seminars in the different spaces, always identify that one couple in your community that you admire that can come and give hope, give encouragement to these young people who are seeing a lot on the social media, a lot of hopelessness. You know, a big wedding that costs millions of money, tomorrow it is down. You know, and you know, not to look at marriage as something so public, you know. You get married and you want everyone to keep looking at you and your spouse on social media. It's about, again, finding that I think if we totally understand the sacrament of marriage and make the young people to understand what this sacrament is, we will find more people desiring to get married. And that is why the question on, you know, these people who, you know, you got married and then you separated, and so children are there, and this mother cannot allow the children to access the father. And so this lady is wondering, do I let my children to know or not? Children always have a right, and children are a blessing to the family. And so whether you're telling them today or tomorrow, it is at the right age where children should know who their father is. And that is because there was a question on that. Do you introduce this child who does not know the father because we separated because there was violence? You introduce the father to the child at the right age. And this speaks to a lot of doing away with the selfishness that most of us are having. And people are getting married or choosing to stay single out of selfishness. And that's maybe just to conclude. I look at marriage as an institution where we are offering ourselves for the good of each other. And there's someone who says that love is to will good for the other person. So if we are choosing to enter into marriage and we're intentionally doing it, so it means that every day I will strive to serve my spouse. I will strive to do good to my partner because, you know, I'm doing it out of love. So whether he will, reciprocate immediately or tomorrow, and somehow you get to convert someone. Imagine if you're always receiving. Will you not start asking yourself one day, how about I give because I think I've been over-receiving? I think this person has been too kind to me. So selflessness as opposed to selfishness, I think will help us to strive to living marriage and family life to the full, and even will help us to avoid these issues of femininity. Sometimes I say feminism is just being anti-men. I don't want any man around me, and so I want to just be single. Is it being about not liking men, not wanting men to be in our lives? So I think we have a lot that we can do to encourage hope in marriage. And for me, as I said, let us use and listen to older couples, listen to the gospel teachings on marriage, and model that to the younger generation, because that will give us hope to see marriage standing tomorrow. Thank you.
Maybe a word from my co-hosts of the panel. Last word.
I don't think it is wise to speak out to the speakers, but we want to appreciate you, especially Dr. Barrack and of course Elise. I am proud of the work that you do. Both of you do a great work in your social spaces. You work very well with us to be able to educate us more on how we need to have good governance in each area. And also this you do very well in helping the families to be better places and to help our young people to really admire this great institution that we have. So for me, it's just to thank you and to encourage you that continue being those places, continue to talking to us. Don't stop even 1 minute. I watch you a lot. And also, I've been in your forums, we've talked about it. Please don't stop. And especially the neglected part of the people are these ones, the church. Most of the time we do a lot of programs out there, but not forgetting that the priests are the custodians of this sacrament. They're the ones who are in the parishes. Those good programs also bring them here to our seminaries so that we are able to grow together. Bring it to the institution of formation. Because when talked about family, even the sisters who are here are not exempted. In fact, John Paul says our houses of formation needs to be open to help couples. So I think also visit our spaces so that you can share more, we grow together with you. Thank you very much, and we appreciate you.
Thank you, and my last word is all said and done. We know that Christian hope is based on the fact that God is alive in every situation. Even right now in Tanzania, God is alive. He has not died. And so whatever upheavals, whatever confusing paradoxes we might come across, we are sustained by the fact that God is watching the situation. He is almighty, He is present everywhere, and He is seeing what is happening. He is not dead. God exists. And that is the source of our Christian hope for the world, for the church, for the young people, and for the family. Let us hold on to that. Thank you very much.